In a shocking move, President Trump has announced the end of USAID in Africa, leaving many wondering what this means for the future of international aid and development in the continent. In this video, we'll dive into the implications of this decision and explore what happens next. From the potential impact on African economies to the role of other global players, we'll examine the complexities of this situation and what it could mean for the people of Africa. Stay tuned for a detailed analysis of this significant development.
The United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, plays a significant role in providing financial assistance and development programs across Africa. USAID's funding in Africa is aimed at addressing a wide range of issues, including health, education, economic growth, democracy and governance, humanitarian assistance, and environmental sustainability. Here are some key areas where USAID funding is typically directed in Africa. Health. USAID invests heavily in health programs, particularly in combating infectious diseases such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. The President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief, also known as PEPFAR, is one of the most notable initiatives, providing billions of dollars to support HIV/AIDS treatment and prevention. USAID also supports maternal and child health, nutrition and family planning services. Education. USAID funds programs aimed at improving access to quality education, particularly for girls and marginalized communities. This includes building schools, training teachers, and providing educational materials. Economic growth. USAID supports initiatives that promote economic development and reduce poverty. This includes funding for agriculture, small and medium-sized enterprises, and infrastructure projects. Programs often focus on increasing agricultural productivity, improving market access, and fostering entrepreneurship. Humanitarian assistance. In response to crises such as famine, conflict, and natural disasters, USAID provides emergency food aid, shelter, and medical care. The agency works with international organizations and local partners to deliver timely and effective assistance, peace and security. USAID funds programs aimed at conflict prevention, peace building, and post-conflict recovery. This includes support for disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration programs, as well as initiatives to promote social cohesion and reconciliation. The closure of USAID operations under the Trump administration, citing rampant corruption and fraud by staff, had significant implications for Africa and US-Africa relations. Here are some key implications of such a decision. Reduction in development assistance impact on health programs. USAID has been a major contributor to health initiatives in Africa, including HIV/AIDS prevention and treatment through PEPFAR, malaria control, and maternal health. A reduction in funding could weaken these programs, leading to increased mortality rates and the resurgence of diseases. What this means is that many people will die of HIV/AIDS in Africa due to how costly the drugs are. Food security and agriculture. USAID supports agricultural development and food security programs in Africa. Cuts could exacerbate hunger and poverty, particularly in regions already vulnerable to climate change and conflict. Oh my God. Education and economic growth. USAID-funded programs in education and economic development could be scaled back, limiting opportunities for youth and hindering long-term economic growth. Humanitarian consequences. Crisis response. USAID provides critical humanitarian aid during crises such as droughts, famines, and conflicts. Reduced funding could delay or weaken responses to emergencies, increasing suffering and displacement. Refugee support. Many African countries host large refugee populations. USAID's support for refugee programs could be curtailed, straining host countries and worsening conditions for displaced people. Geopolitical implications. Shift in influence. A reduction in U.S. aid could create a vacuum that other global powers, such as China or Russia, might fill. China has been increasing its investments and influence in Africa through infrastructure projects and trade deals, potentially marginalizing U.S. interests. It is therefore significant to see how unreliable the U.S. is when it comes to their foreign policies. African leaders should shift towards those that can provide them with economic stability and growth. Erosion of soft power. USAID programs have historically bolstered the U.S. quote, image as a partner in Africa's development. Cutting aid could damage this reputation, reducing U.S. influence in diplomatic and strategic matters. This is something that can affect the U.S., which they kept a blind eye on. Impact on U.S.-Africa relations strained partnerships. African governments and civil society organizations that rely on USAID support may view the U.S. as an unreliable partner, potentially straining diplomatic and economic ties. That is truth, as the U.S. is adding salt to injury by processing to deport many African immigrants living in the U.S. trade and investment. A weakened relationship could also affect trade and investment opportunities between the U.S. and Africa, particularly under initiatives like the African Growth and Opportunity Act. Long-term consequences for Africa development setbacks. Reduced aid could slow progress toward achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in Africa, particularly in areas like poverty reduction, health, and education. Increased instability, economic and social challenges exacerbated by reduced aid, could contribute to political instability and conflict in some regions. African leaders should devise ways to deal with that, as you are the best in managing your own situation than someone else. Domestic U.S. implications. Criticism from advocacy groups. The decision has faced backlash from U.S.-based NGOs, humanitarian organizations, and advocacy groups that work on African issues. But Trump is standing firm on his decision to use taxpayers' money to develop the U.S. rather than waste it in other countries, just because of power and control. Congressional pushback. Members of Congress who support foreign aid and recognize its strategic importance have opposed the cuts, leading to political friction. Trump is just a fan of defying orders, including court orders. The closure or reduction of USAID operations in Africa under the Trump administration would have far-reaching consequences, both for African nations and for U.S.-Africa relations. While it might align with a broader America First policy aimed at reducing foreign aid spending, the move could undermine long-term U.S. strategic interests, weaken partnerships, and create opportunities for other global powers to expand their influence in Africa. The humanitarian and developmental setbacks in Africa would also have global repercussions, given the interconnected nature of health, security, and economic stability.